just wait a wee bit for people to join us. Good to see people joining us this afternoon. Thank you so much. Had quite a lot of good interest in this webinar because I think we all want to learn a bit more about telling great volunteer stories. Just waiting for people to finish joining us this afternoon. Oh, well, we'll start us off. Kia ora, everyone. I'm Mark McLaughlin. I'm Comms Manager at Volunteer New Zealand, and it's my pleasure to be part of this session today. I'll just start our hui with the karakia. Whakataka te hao ki te uru. Whakataka te hao ki te tonga. Kia mā kina kina ki uta. Kia mā taratara ki tai. E hi ake ana te atakura. He tio, he huka, he hau hunga. Tihei Māori ora. And it gives me great pleasure to welcome you all today and to welcome especially Amanda, who is going to be telling us all about how to create a great volunteer story. Now, Amanda is a published author and she's a wonderful human being. And I had the pleasure of getting to know her when she was with Volunteer Wellington just last year. She's now moved on to a role with Pororua City Libraries. And I'd also like to acknowledge Volunteer Wellington for where this presentation was originally developed for, and they've allowed us and Amanda to share that with a wider group. Just one promo from me is that we're really encouraging people to tell volunteer stories, particularly this year in International Volunteer Year. And we have some material on our website under the IVY, International Volunteer Year campaigns, all about called What's Your Story? And it's got some ideas there for how you can tell your volunteer stories, because we really like to get that real diversity of stories and ideas spread right across the year. So I will now hand over to Amanda and let her guide us through the process.
I remembered to unmute myself, so that's a good start. Thank you for that lovely introduction, and hello everyone. So my name's Amanda and I worked at Volunteer Wellington for a while, and I've also been a volunteer manager, and I've got a background in libraries, so I'm really rooted in working with community. So I've also, in my other life, written lots of books. I've 30 plus have been published. I sold my first book to Penguin Random House in the US about 20 years ago, and since written for US publishers and UK publishers. And I've got a background in, I've got a Bachelor of Arts in journalism and English, but really my heart is in story. So I love writing books, I love reading books, I love looking for my next book to read. So this is just a deep dive into story and how you can hopefully incorporate some of that in your day-to-day mahi. So we're going to look at story, character, structure, writing tips and tricks, some pitfalls, and some final thoughts. And I think we'll hold off questions until the end, if that's okay, and then we'll just do a Q&A on whatever you need. So as we do this, I am a storyteller. I'm not going to pretend I'm not. So I'm using my author lens, and I'm going to talk about story exactly how I would talk to any writers. But don't worry, I'm not going to make you write an 80,000 word book unless you want to, unless you feel something burning away in the background there. But we're going to take all the information that I use every day in my storytelling for novels and how you can apply it to writing volunteer stories, doing impact reports, doing funding, all your comms and marketing. My takeaway, I just hope you understand how story works and maybe get some takeaway light bulb moments that you can use every day. So before we start, I just want to quickly address why story matters. We are wired for story. Our brains process so much information all the time, and so they start to take neural shortcuts to get to the good stuff quickly. So, for example, I'm Australian. If I'm walking in the bush and I see a long brown thing on the floor, before I know it, I'm screaming and I'm flooded with adrenaline. And this is because instead of having this long version of my brain saying, oh dear, I've identified something, and it might be dangerous, but who knows? It knows to let me it knows I need to move quickly. So it gives me this short version, and I'm screaming and doing the things before I even know what's happening. And this is because if you grew up in Australia like I did, and you heard enough stories about snakes and the dangers they involve, your brain starts to create a narrative around it so that you will pay attention to it when you need to. Oh, sorry. Hang on. Why are you not letting me get to all my notes? Bear with me 1 second. My PowerPoint is failing me. Oh, how annoying. Sorry. Because I've shared my screen, it won't let me scroll down my notes. And you do not want me going freestyle. All sorts of weird and wonderful things will come out. Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, so story works with our brain as a survival instinct. So you could think of it like a cautionary tale, like Little Red Riding Hood. That's not just a fairy story. It's don't stray off the path. Don't trust everyone. They could be, dangerous underneath, and they could eat you. So story is something that we're really wired for, and we can sometimes feel that those story beats in us. If we've ever watched a movie or read a book and got really irritated by the end because it's just felt wrong, it's not ended the way you felt it should, and it sort of creates this dissonance. It's because you want a resolution and you feel there should be a resolution, and it's the wrong one. And this dissonance and dissatisfaction couldn't happen if we didn't truly understand story deep down. A fun side fact, many writers are born because they've been irritated by how a movie or book's ended, which is where fan fiction comes from. But it's just a reminder that it really is, it's almost in our body. You can sometimes just feel it when the story doesn't sound right. So, what is a story? I write commercial fiction, and so this is my commercial fiction take on what a story is. It's a character going on an external journey that leads to an internal transformation. So we have a person, a character going out into the world. They're facing challenges, they're letting go of old beliefs, and they're becoming something new. And a really important part of story is that the character at the beginning is not the same as the character at the end. So we really do see that transformation. And our role as storytellers is to capture those emotional changes that happen as the character evolves. But we also want the reader to feel those emotional changes. And if we're really doing a great job, we'll also get the reader to have an emotional change themselves. So story can be really powerful. So If character is at the heart of story, it makes sense that we start here. So often when we're reading a book or watching a movie, we might sometimes feel the character they're not quite believable, or they might be two-dimensional. And this has happened because either the writer might not know them that well, or they don't know how to capture that on the page. So they haven't let the reader in to see what's making that character tick. The quickest way to get to the heart of a character is by using a thing called goal, motivation, and conflict. So a character's goal is just what we know a SMART goal to be. It's a measurable external goal. If they achieve it, they know and we know that they've achieved it. Motivation. Motivation, this is the backstory. This is the reason why a character does or wants anything. By making the backstory as universal as possible and tapping into things that are shared beliefs, shared fears, just shared needs, cultural things that bring us all together, it can really help the audience recognize why that character wants it, and it becomes more powerful. And then the last part of that is conflict. If you don't have conflict, I don't often like to say you must do this to do a story, but there is no story without conflict. If there's no conflict, your character's sitting on the couch watching television, to be fair, which is what we would all do without conflict. Conflict is anything that stops your character achieving that goal. It could be an external event, like if I want to go and get a cup of coffee across the road, but I have a hole in my shoe and I don't want to leave the house. It could be an internal event, like I have deep anxiety and I'm scared to leave the house to get the coffee. Both things are going to stop me leaving the house. The stories, because they're about this, we want that resolution. So they're about conflict resolution. So the bigger the conflict is in terms of resolving it, the more powerful the story. So a small conflict like I have a hole in my shoe is easily fixable. Well, in my case, it is I put on another pair of shoes and I go across the road. Whereas that internal conflict of the anxiety is harder for me to resolve. And so we get a stronger conflict because it's harder for me or the character to overcome. So now we're going to get to some how you can bring this in when you're doing any of your writing for a volunteer interview or anything to do with the mahi of your organisation. So I'm going to take a fictional character called Joe, and we're going to see what makes them tick. Goal. Joe needs to raise $1 gazillion to help save the only health clinic in his local community. His motivation. Joe wants this because his mother, a single parent, was supported by the clinic when she was dying. Without them, she would have been in pain and far away from whānau. He doesn't want that to happen to anyone else. And his conflict. Joe can't raise that amount of money doing sausage sizzles, and he doesn't have any other funding experience. So right up, we've got a measurable goal. We clearly know what will happen if he doesn't achieve it. We've got really strong motivation. It's emotional. It's something that we can relate to. And we have some conflict. Now, it's not huge conflict, but it's conflict to start us off. And I know out of everything, this is probably, you're thinking, well, that's for books, but what I'm doing, I'm not going to look for conflict. I really urge you, and this is the thing that might not be coming up in your volunteer interviews and questions when you're talking to people, ask them about the conflict and the things that made it difficult. It could be as simple as, I live on the other side of town. I have to catch 3 buses to come up and do my volunteer shift. That's conflict, and it's really powerful, and it actually will then show who the character is or who the person is on the page. So that's really my challenge to you, is think about the conflict. And also notice we've just asked 3 questions. We haven't had to talk about the mahi of your organisation. There's no stats in there. There's no mission statements or values or, those impact measuring things that we often want to throw into all our stories. We're doing it directly through Joe's GMC or from his viewpoint. And so it's really powerful because it's anchored to a person, and someone reading that, because they're wired for story too, they will relate to it because it's personal. So we now have our GMC. So now we can start a little bit of the writing. And so meet Joe. He's the man who refused to give up his dream to help keep the doors open at his local health clinic in honor of his beloved mother. So again, those 3 questions are in there, and that's just 2 sentences. I've kept the conflict vague, but we've said he's refused to give up. So we can see that there has been a challenge in there. So from that cool, juicy stuff, we've got to start to a story, and you're getting into the really powerful things that people are really going to resonate with. So some takeaways for character. Stories are about people going through an external experience and having an internal transformation. Always keep the person at the heart of the narrative. We respond to people better than we respond to facts and figures. Look for those universal experiences that your audience can relate to. So really lean into motivation. And I mean, this could be if you're writing articles on the recipients of your mahi as well. But if it's a universal thing like hunger, fear, cold, we can relate to that. And use GMC to show the transformations by honing in on these 3 things. Well, that was easy. So now that we've looked at character, we're going to move on to story structure. You are having a very fast one-on-one on how to write a book here, so well done. Story structure is the road that your character travels along, meeting those external challenges which are going to lead to that internal transformation. I'm not going to go deep into it. There's loads of different story structures. I love it. I could talk about it for days, but we're just going to have a super fast crash course. You don't need to remember this per se. I think as we go through it, hopefully you resonate with what some of these beats are. And it's really fun. You can annoy people when you're watching television, and you can start pointing out story beats as you see them. It can get a little bit addictive. It also means you can accidentally ruin movies at the same time. So I'm just going to take us through a quick 3-act structure and talk about some of the beats. So Act 1 is what you see in the pink. We start with the ordinary world. Your character might have problems, but they're comfortable with their problems. It's not enough to make them do anything about it. Then an inciting incident comes along, or a call to adventure. This is something that's different from the day before, and it's asking them to do something they don't want to do. No one likes change, which is why we also have a debate. Most stories will have some kind of debate, even if it's just in a character's head. It's like, I don't want to go, or you'll have another character being that voice of reason saying, don't be crazy, you can't go. So there'll be a debate beat, but then the character will step into the second act, and it is an actual physical stepping. You see this all the time in movies. They'll catch the train or the aeroplane, or they'll cross a bridge, or you'll see a big door or a cinematic arch. It's a physical movement into Act 2, and that's when we move into the heart of the story. So the first Act 2 is really big, so we split it into 2 halves. This is the blue part. So we start with Act 2A. The character has a plan, but it's a lazy plan. It is the low-hanging fruit of plans. And then we have a fun and game sequences, and these change for genres. So it's not about the laughing, it's just about what we expect would be a fun part of whatever our genre is. So for romance, fun and game would be dating. It would be going to the shops to get a new outfit or getting a makeover. You see a lot of montages. If you were going to a training academy, this is where there'd be, learning how to fight or things like that. Or James Bond, it would be going to get the new car with all the gadgets on it. But it's not all fun and games. So then we move on to pinch point 1. And this is simply a reminder of the conflict. The character is there for a reason. For a romance, it could be the ex-partner turns up. For a thriller, it could be someone's following you or a blackmail note arrives. Just something to remember, that it's not all fun and games. We then get to the midpoint twist, and this is literally usually at the midpoint of the book or the movie. It can take a number of forms, but it's usually once the character passes it, there's no going back. They are fully committed, and often it becomes, now it's personal and I'm going to roll up my sleeves and really try. And then we move to Act 2B, and this is where bad plans and bad decisions are made. If someone's going to break in and read text messages or break into an office or do something a bit dodgy, it's going to happen up here. We then get another pinch point as another reminder of the conflict, and we want things to get more difficult. So this conflict escalates, and we're always trying to squeeze our characters, because character is revealed as they go through this path. We then get to a beat. Hopefully you've all known from, not in personal life, just from the movies or books, that black moment or all is lost or the dark night of the soul, and I'm doomed, it's all over. And then the next day the sun rises and something happens, and they get that aha moment, which then moves us into Act 3 over here in the olive green. And then the character finally has another plan, and it's a better plan. They've learned from their other plans, and it's the final plan. They'll storm the castle, order is restored, and then our character who started in Act 1 as one kind of person is transformed, and then we have the new world. So why did I tell you all this when we have clearly decided that you're not here to write books? It's because in community sector, a lot of the mahi you're doing, maybe your volunteers, maybe your recipients, there's a lot of trauma, and it's really important that we don't re-traumatize the people that we're writing about or the audience that we're writing to. And so I'll touch on that a bit later, but it's being really mindful of how you show people on their story journey and considering the order that you present information. And the great news is that story is all about time traveling. We can move all this stuff around, and there's other tricks we can do as well. So we're going to have a look. Let me find my mouse to Elizabeth Gilbert's Eat, Pray, Love. So the first line of Eat, Pray, Love is, I wish Giovanni would kiss me. And she's in Italy and it's sunny and she's on a date, and it's sort of, she's in a romantic city. And when you think about that fun and games beat I was mentioning, which is in Act 2A, that's exactly what this chapter 1 is. It's a fun and games beat. The next chapter starts 3 years earlier, and it's she's sobbing on the bathroom floor for the 47th night in a row and says, I don't want to be married anymore. So when we look where that falls in story structure, we've got Act 2B, that black moment, dark night of the soul. 47th night, lying on the bathroom floor, is there. That's a full-on black moment. But then we've also got the I don't want to be married anymore. That's an inciting incident. That's a call to action to change her life. And then the next few chapters sort of dig into that motivation of why she's going to go on this epic big change. And so by moving back and forth in time, what she's actually done to the reader is set you up in a safe place. I'm happy. I'm eating ice cream. I'm thinking about kissing someone. It's quite reassuring. And then she takes you back into that backstory, but we know that there's light. So I love that example because it really shows the power of being mindful of how you can move these things around. So let's go back to our friend Jo and see how Jo fits into a story structure. Right. Jo's inciting incident is that the health centre might have to close. His debate, he's motivated by his mother's death, so he wants to save it, but he doesn't know how. Stepping into 2, he physically goes to the centre and says he wants to help. His fun and games in Act 2, he does a solo sausage sizzle to support the centre. Never going to say that sentence again. Pinch point 1, he raises $23, yay, but he spent $45 and it rained. So the midpoint, he hears his mother's voice, don't give up, Jo. And so he's more committed to it. And he comes up with a new plan. He starts talking to local suppliers and gets free sausage and bread. Then his black moment comes and he loses his barbecue spot outside the big hardware. But his aha moment is when his customers all turn up on his home doorstep wanting to help because they've seen what he's done. And so together they storm the castle and they approach multiple locations so they don't just rely on one spot. And then we move to the new world where Jo now coordinates a team of volunteers to run sausage sizzles all around the place and other fundraising activities. And more importantly, the doors of the centre stay open. So now let's see, by taking that story structure, and we've already done our GMC for Jo, so now we're going to flip on and see how we can start to craft that into a story. Meet Jo. He's a man who refused to give up his dream and help keep the doors open at his local health clinic in honour of his beloved mother. For the last 5 years, Jo spent every weekend sizzling sausages and whipping up support for Marie's Centre, a health facility in his community. It's a project that's close to his heart and was born from the devastating loss of his mother almost 30 years ago. The road hasn't been easy, but Jo's persistence paid off, and now he has a team of 20 like-minded volunteers to raise some much-needed funds, as well as encouraging local schools to do their own events to help the centre. There's so many times when I wanted to give up, but then I would remember the pain my mother went through and I knew I had to keep going, Jo said before disappearing back to his fried onions and the crowd of hungry customers. Chief Executive of Marie's Centre, Kathy Kay, agrees. When Jo first approached us with his idea, we thought it might be a one-off event, but now Jo and his team have made a huge difference in keeping our doors open so we can continue to support our community. Right. So I'm just going to go back now to a story chart, a story structure again, so we can give you an idea of where these elements can sit, just so you can sort of see how it all pulled together. And you don't need to create these story structure things at all. I don't mean to give you more work to do. It's just starting to get mindful of where elements might sit in a story structure so that you're using them intentionally rather than just like, oh yeah, I'll just slap this here and there. So it gives a bit more power when you know why you're putting things where. So first line comes from an Act 2A fun and games beat. Jo has spent every weekend sizzling sausages. The second line is that Act 1. It's in his ordinary world. This is where he was at the start. It's the devastating loss of his mother. Now, the third line, I like to pack a punch. So I've got one part coming from Act 1, the much needed funds. We know that's the inciting incident that called him into the story. The third line also had a pinch point one in it because the road hasn't been easy. So I'm reminding you of the conflict. He didn't just rock up and make it happen. And then the third line was also a black moment beat of Jo wanted to give up. And then over the sixth line, the new world, Jo and his team have made a huge difference. So we can just sort of see how we can move things around. The story doesn't always need to be linear, but like I say, there's a real power to doing these things intentionally. So our takeaway from story story structure. Story structure, it's the road your characters travel along as they come up against obstacles which will try and stop them getting to the end. Understanding the structure can help you decide how to tell your own stories. And you can time travel in the story, which can be used to make certain events less painful. Wow, well done. I'm not even joking. Understanding how character and story structure all come together, if that's the juice of how books are written. And what we're going to go to next is more the bread and butter of writing techniques. And these are just a few writing tips and tricks that you can use to help pull the story together further. So we're going to do show, don't tell, an elevator pitch, pacing, and dirty drafts. And I'm not going to go too deeply into these. These are just these are writing toolbox things that you can have. And the more you start applying them, the easier they become to use. So show, don't tell. Don't tell me the moon is shining. Show me the glint of light on broken glass by Anton Chekhov. Show, don't tell gives new writers heart palpitations and facial tics. It sounds really easy, and then you try and do it. It's like, oh, but it's really, really useful. We can all apply it in our writing. I mentioned at the beginning that sometimes a character might come across as two-dimensional, and this is often because the writer hasn't shown the audience who the character is. They might know who they are in their head, but it's not coming across on the page. So telling is what happens when we just say to the reader, this happened and this happened and this happened. And we're sort of giving a commentary on an event that's been in the past. And it creates a distance between the reader and the narrative. Showing is what happens when we let the reader see the story unfold on the page. It happens in real time, and it takes the information that we want to tell, but we play it out loud. So it's like there's a camera on our shoulder. And the quickest way I can explain it is if we think of the news. News stories fully understand the power of story. So if we have a fire and we're watching the television news and there are two people sitting behind a desk telling us, oh, there's been a terrible fire. Yes, we might pay attention to it, but probably not. And they understand this. So they're always, we're just going to location to our person on the ground to comment on the fire, because they understand that our brain can process images at a faster speed than words. So they know if we are looking at a constructed narrative of a fire, we're not looking at a fire there. We're looking at a man standing and there's some, like, maybe it's cordoned off, there's some firefighters in the background, but there's no actual fire. But there's more power if they cross to him and he can give the update, because our brain is now going to pay attention to it. So creating a situation that shows the story unfolding rather than just having someone sitting at a desk telling is the power of show, don't tell. So we're going to see what that looks. I'm going to keep with the fire analogy and just show you quickly what that looks like when we're writing. So we could say a house burnt down. We could say Jill watched as the fire burned down her house. Or local resident Jill gasped a ragged breath as orange flames devoured the dry wood that had once been her family home. Would things ever be the same again? So what we've done on a macro level, so a big picture level, is that we've created the scene of the fire. The fire's still happening. Jill is watching it happen, so it's personal because we know we've linked it to a character, and we don't actually know how it's going to end. And I've, because I can't help myself, I've in italics have added a little, question of, a hook, which is designed. Hooks are designed to make you keep reading, and it's an unanswered question. Will things ever be the same again? We don't know. Whereas if we look at a house burned down, that's happened, and we just don't have that same emotional input to it. So it sort of creates a visual anchor for the reader. Now, on a micro level, show don't tell is also about a visceral reaction that a character is going to have. So a visceral reaction are those unconscious things that we do and we might not know. So the hairs stand up on the back of your neck, or your palms get sweaty, or adrenaline surges through you, your pulse flickers. They're all visceral reactions, and we can use them instead of saying, Jill's sad, or, Jill's scared. We can go and look at what the visceral reaction might be that she's having. And a really quick trick is look for those words like happy, angry, sad, mad, whatever's appropriate, and go find out what the visceral reaction is. Ask the internet. It will tell you how do I describe a visceral reaction for angry. You don't want to be too purple prosy. I wouldn't normally write Jill gasped a ragged breath, but it's just to give you an idea of how you can create a showing moment rather than just telling the reader. The main thing to understand, and the more you do it, the more comfortable you get with it. We can't show everything because otherwise it's all showing, and our brain likes to pay attention to things that we're shown. And there's another Chekhov quote, don't show me a gun in the first act unless someone's going to pick it up and use it in the third act, or something to that effect. Because our brain, if you read mysteries, we're always we don't like that dissonance. We want the resolution. So we're tracking things as we go. So if you're showing a scene unfold, our brain's going to pay attention to it. So use showing for the things that you really want the reader to remember. And telling is actually really useful. There's nothing wrong with telling at all. And one, it can get you through the boring bits if you want to segue into a next big thing. And also it can create that distance for those traumatic events when you don't want people to be in the, living in that full moment. So there is a real power to using these things. There's a lot of stuff on Show Don't Tell on the internet, so don't worry if you forget this later, but do start trying to see where you can bring it into your writing, and it will sort of help give it a bit more energy. Right. So let's apply some Show Don't Tell. I don't even know what I've got here. Oh, yes, here we go. We're going back to Joe. So I knew I had to keep going, Joe said, before disappearing back to his fried onions and the crowd of hungry customers. So dialogue acts like a fake show don't tell. Sometimes in a book, you wouldn't use dialogue to show don't tell, but it's a quick way to get information through a character's mouth. But in this case, the showing is having Joe. We've heard Joe speak, and we've heard about Joe, but now Joe's not interested in speaking. Joe's disappearing back to his fried onions and the crowd of hungry customers. And so we got a visual. We can sort of, some of us might be thinking, I know what fried onions smell like, or I know what a sausage sizzle stand looks like outside a hardware when people are queuing up. So we've created a bit of a visual that the reader can see and link onto. So we've sort of shown Joe in his element, not just said, yeah, that Joe, he does lots of sausage sizzles. So it's not a big moment, but you can slip them in there. Right, elevator pitch. You might have heard of elevator pitches, literally designed for if you accidentally get trapped in a lift with Steven Spielberg and want to pitch him that screenplay that we all carry around with us, allegedly. But in regular life, an elevator pitch is just a 25 words blurb to describe whatever you're doing. I use them all the time. That's literally how I sell books. Before I pitch a book to an agent or an editor, I do my 25 words first, and then I would develop it into an outline, and then I would do some chapters. They are just so useful for many, many reasons. The main one is that it keeps you focused on what the heart of the story is. And you might only be writing, small articles of 250 or 500 words, but it's still easy to get lost when you have lots of facts and figures, lots of stats, lots of quotes, and it just keeps you on task. Always focus on a character. Use your GMC to help you create that elevator pitch. And this it can get a bit nuanced now for defining your audience and creating your voice. For the voice, your organizations might already have a comms voice, but if they don't, you can lean into it. So it doesn't need to be your own. If you were going to write a book, doesn't need to be like that, but you can create a voice that isn't, it doesn't need to be, you know, too formal, however it suits your organization. But also when you create the voice, think of who your audience is too, who's the recipient, and what do you want them to do with whatever the article is that you're writing. Do you want them to come and volunteer for you? Do you want Volunteer in New Zealand to put it up on their social media for you? Do you want a fundraiser to donate to you? So this 25-word pitch can do a lot of heavy lifting if you take all this stuff into account. So let's look at one. Oh, look, I've already done it. And that's literally, like I say, I'm so hardwired now. I write blurbs all the time because I do get off task very, very easily. So I just used a GMC. You can see I've got to use it in a PowerPoint, but you know, you could also, if you did this and then also wrote your story, you could use this to pitch to your whois, to your stakeholders. If you're at a networking event, it just becomes really easy. You can use it on your social media. If you were sending it to a journalist, it might be easier for them to just pull out and use as a pull quote. They're just so useful. If you haven't tried one before, I really encourage you to give them a whirl. I'm not going to lie, most people don't like doing them. It's hard to condense things down. And so the rule is, yes, it does need to be 25 words just for your own practice. I won't get mad if it's 26, but it's, you know, the more you try and push it down, that's where the good stuff comes out. And my number one rule of writing is we only want the good stuff. If you're bored by anything you write, cut it. It sounds really ruthless, but if you're bored, the reader's bored too. Right, now we're going to move on to pacing. Pacing is the speed that a story unfolds on the page. And if we think like a heart rate monitor, we don't want a flat line. We want things to go up and down. We want peaks and valleys. And it's the same for a book. And it's the same for a story article as well. You want a nice pace so that people read it. The only reason that we're writing is so that people read it. We want eyeballs. So there's a few different ways that you can control your pacing. The first one is action and reaction. So this is a sequence that happens. So if we have an action, such as a fire, we need to then have a reaction of what happens to that action. Action movies and don't like them, it's because there's too much action and there's not enough emotional reaction to it. We might just get, ouch, that hurt, or, you know, a little bit, but you don't always get a lot. And I think it's sometimes the same why people don't like romance. If romance is often a lot of internal stuff going on, a lot of it's, you know, emotional, heartfelt, and you don't always get enough action. So getting that balance right of both, even in your stories, because we're writing stories about people, and if people are doing things, they're also having reactions to the things they're doing. And by using those the action reaction too, that's how you're going to capture those emotional transformations that the characters are making. The second thing is white space. Please use white space. White space is just everyone's secret weapon. I think there's a lot of research now that we're all losing focus. I think with social media and everything's faster and faster. So just make it easy for people. If things are too dense, and unless your target audience, unless you know that they like a lot of blocked out long paragraphs, a lot of us find it easier to read with white space. So look at how you can break up text, use bullet points, use bold, use italics, subheadings, dialogue. Try for tricks just to break up that text, or just really short paragraphs too. You can have a one-word paragraph. There are literally no rules. We just want some white space. Dialogue is another thing that's going to really increase your pacing. One, because it can give you that white space, but two, we just kind of, it's that thing too, I think someone's saying it, we're anchored back to that personal, emotional, connection. And so we pay a bit more attention. So really let dialogue be your best friend. It's perfect for this kind of storytelling. You're probably already using a lot of quotes. I hope you are. Make sure that what they're saying is worth saying. Like, we don't want, you're clearly not, like, when I read a book and it's like, hi, Joe, how are you? I'm good, thanks, Amanda. How are you? You don't want that kind of dialogue. That's just really boring. We don't need it on the page. So if you're using dialogue for your interviews, make sure it's saying some good stuff. And don't be afraid to break it up too with, you can take the front bit and the back bit and just join it together with the ... as long as you're not misquoting them. Double duty. What I mean by that is, in the community sector, we're usually very resource poor, so we're very canny and making things stretch. And we do that with our writing. We really want to look for places where we can do that double handling. And I've already talked about like white space and dialogue. They go hand in hand. So if you do one, you're also going to do another. Now, covering it in glitter. This is my way of saying, don't hide your good stuff. If you have a point that you want to make that point clearly. Sometimes we can think, we'd just be like quite subtle and slip it in there, or, I've said it. It's hidden down there in the fourth paragraph. Don't do that. If you want something said and you want people to pay attention to it, put it in a place where they're going to see it. There's an old journalism thing, don't bury the lead, for days when it was, the newspapers were all set in columns, and if big news came in, half your story might be cut. And if you had your good stuff down the bottom, it was just gone. And these days too, if people aren't interested enough, they're not going to read to the bottom. So I really encourage you to, if you want a point, cover it in glitter so that people are getting it. And by cover it in glitter, I just mean make it really obvious. It could be that one-word sentence, or it could just have its own line, just so that you know that they're going to see it. So let's look at some pacing. This is Amanda discovering how to draw on her PowerPoint. Go me. So for action and reaction, I didn't put a huge amount in here, but in the red, where we've got Joe's dialogue, Joe spoke, and then he turned back. He disappeared back to his fried onions and the crowd of hungry customers. So what that tells us is his action is to speak. His reaction is, I don't want to give a quote. I like being in the background. I don't want attention to me. I'd rather just concentrate on my mahi. And I think this is nearly all the volunteers that I've worked with are often like that. They're sort of like being that unsung hero. They don't necessarily want the attention on them. So you can convey that, and that's a lovely story to convey. That's really heartwarming when we know that a volunteer is there, because they're wonderful. And so you can get that in by showing those actions and reactions. Where the yellow is, that's just a signal that we've put some white space in there, so my eyes don't glaze over. I've got two lots of dialogue. I have run them on to each other, but that's fine. Like, you can have a lot of he said, she said if you want. And then I've got in the red as well, I've got some double duty, which I was talking about, because we want to make everything work for its space on the page. So we've got the dialogue. We know that it improves the pacing. We've got the fried onions and the hungry crowd, which we know are a show don't tell. And we've got Joe's action and reaction. We've also got a really beautiful example of some social proof of your mahi. And you always, if people are saying nice things about you, you want to make sure you're getting that in there. And it's more powerful if you can see that character, well, the person doing it on the page as well. So there's a lot of double handling in there. And we've only got 4 paragraphs. So that's pretty good. Oh, and we've also covered it in glitter, because I've popped that blurb up the top, just in italics, just as that little teaser, so people are going to read it. They know what the story's about before they commit to reading those other 3 paragraphs. Right, dirty drafts. Dirty drafts, as shocking as this sounds, most of us do not write beautiful first drafts. When I write a book, when every author I know, it's all a big hot mess. And the thing is, we have a lot of editorial processes. Books go through lots and lots and lots of polishing. So they don't start out as diamonds. So really get comfortable with just keeping it as a dirty draft to begin with, and think of it as a way to just pull all your ideas and brain dump your ideas onto the page. The reason, and I say don't edit too much as you go, it's very hard to not edit. I edit as I go, but I don't over edit. And the reason is, like in book world, a lot of emerging writers will write themselves into the story, and then they'll go to an editor or critique partners and get delightfully told your story actually starts at chapter 4, and those first 3 chapters are just backstory and you don't need them, which is a hard pill to swallow at any time. But it's an extra hard pill to swallow because you can bet all the money in the world that those writers spent so much time polishing those 3 chapters that have just now been cut. So by not over polishing too quickly, it leaves you open to explore other ideas, rather than just take that low hanging fruit of the first idea that you got. Oh, and I better just go with it, which is also where Get Weird comes into it. So Get Weird is looking for different ways to tell your story, rather than just settling for, oh, this is just the way it came out on the page, so I'm just going to keep it as is. So it's sort of a brainstorming technique, and there's a whole lot, but I really like creating a list. Some people say 20, but I think 10 is plenty. 10 different ways that you could tell the story, whatever that story is. Usually the first couple of ways are those low-hanging fruit ideas. They're the easiest things, and we're wired to do the easy things first. Why wouldn't we? But as we push on and try and come up with more ideas, they start to get better. By the time you get to 10, you've got drunken aliens going on a joyride, and you're probably not going to use 10, but there is a power in pushing past where you feel comfortable in terms of ideas, and somewhere in the middle, you're probably going to find that. So again, we're community organizations, we get to play. And I think you can really play in how we're writing these stories and delivering this information. So I encourage you to try different formats and different ways to deliver these stories. And finally, a beta reader is just someone who's going to give you extra eyes if you can get someone outside your organization that doesn't know the mahi, doesn't know the backstory, it's a lot more powerful, because we get so used to what we do that we make a lot of assumptions, which is fine. That's how you get your job done. But you could be using jargon. You could be getting too caught up in a thing that doesn't make sense to a reader. So by getting a beta reader, you can say, hey, could you check this for whatever it is you want? Or you can just say, could you just read this and give me your thoughts? you can do it either or. It's always nice getting revisions and you're allowed to pout and have some chocolate, but there is some real power, because if they don't understand it, even if it's glaringly obvious to you, that is still a gem. And what it's telling you is it's glaringly obvious to you, but you haven't translated it onto the page. And that's often what these revisions mean. It might mean everything's fine, but you've just not fully explored it on the page in a way that makes sense to them. So I really encourage you to, as you're working on things, if we don't always have that time, but if you do, find a fresh pair of eyes who are going to give you a different perspective. And now the pitfalls. And they're not pitfalls, but so much, they're just things to be aware of. So clearly I make everything up. I write fiction books. That's pretty much all I do, is make things up. But it doesn't mean I want to ignore any damage that I might do to human beings. And all the writers I know are sort of in this same constant conversation with what stereotypes and cliches and tropes are we using and how they might impact people. And this is that thing that we get so used to doing things that we don't question them. We just make these assumptions. So just some things to be aware of. And I know we're all doing this anyway, but I think it's important to have these conversations with each other. So savior. So if you can focus on the people that you're writing about and their journey, rather than focusing fully just on how your mahi solved what problems they might have, you're going to avoid coming across as a savior. We don't want to be the one, look, I've swooped in and I've made everything better, because just depending what you're writing about, it can it can come off the wrong way. So I really encourage you to focus on character and journey and let the story speak for itself, and your mahi will shine through from that. Really be aware of the stereotypes and societal assumptions. A lot of us, we might have great diversity lenses for the areas that we're working in, but there might be other areas that we're just not certain about, and we're accidentally using, we're just making assumptions. It could be around poverty or education or health or race or culture, but there's lots of complex needs out there, so just be mindful of them. Considering diversity and representation, this is more, I'm always in writing, in romance in particular, which is sort of where I was raised, there was a big call to action to they wanted more diversity and representation. And it first got done as, we'll just put all the current writers, we'll just put more diversity in our books. And then it sort of moved to own voice. So we would support people to tell their own stories, their own ways. Unfortunately, there was also a lot of backlash, not backlash, but danger in that, because a lot of people were sort of, they were, I've lost my words. They were vulnerable and getting attacked, and they sort of weren't really getting that support. So they were sort of out there figureheading, and it ended up making it a dangerous place to be. So it's just always mindful of whose stories we're telling, who's at the table with us, do they have access to that same reach? And also the one last thing too, and this is, we get these great volunteer stories and, great recipients of our mahi, but just really making sure someone doesn't become a poster child of your organisation, or brand, and that that we don't want one person or one story carrying the weight of a culture or a group on your behalf. So I know these are things that we're already considering, but I just think, like I say, in writing books, it's literally, I talk about it all the time. I'm always sort of just double checking, have I got this right? Is this appropriate? So learning to just always check in case there's something you've missed. And finally, what have we got here? I can put this down. So forget about your fifth grade teacher. Some of us have a fifth grade teacher that sits in our head and reminds us how bad we are at spelling, how bad we are at grammar, and that we didn't start that story correctly. And it's stopped us from feeling like we're a real writer. And the first thing I work with a lot of emerging writers, and the first thing a lot of them say is, I'm not a real writer. And it's like as if real writers are somehow born with the pen in their hands, and they're not. We become writers by writing. So really forget about the fifth grade teacher and those ideas. I'm not a real writer. You have to have got this degree or done this or that. We're all writers, we're all storytellers. Develop your own voice. We all have our own voice, and we're all humans, and we're trying to tell human stories. And I'm not going to talk about AI, I promise I'm not, but in the world of AI, be human. We're talking about human beings. So bring it with your own humanity. And we're not writing for legal departments or governments. Well, some of you might be, and so, but when appropriate, if you're writing for community and for stakeholders, lean into the humanity. And that's it. Well done. So I'm just gonna stop screen sharing if I can. Great. Back to you, Marg.
Oh, thank you, Amanda. That was really incredibly enlightening. I think we all kind of have our own style that we are familiar with. I've got training as a journalist, and so everything I write just kind of has that, comes with that lens. But then to have your view on how, opening it up and considering the structure and the character was really, quite powerful. So thanks so much.
Oh, good.
I would encourage people to put any questions. I think we've just got the chat function. I'm not sure we've got a Q&A, but either or would be fine. Or even if you want to put on your camera and raise your hand and ask a question, that'd be really fine too. A couple of the things I really liked in particular was love the elevator pitch. I suppose, again, as a journalism, that's your lead. That is the first sentence where you've kind of almost encapsulated the whole story in that one first sentence. But it's such a powerful way of hooking people in, I suppose, and getting them to read more.
Absolutely. And I love writing. I'm unusual amongst a lot of writers. I love writing blurbs. I love writing outlines. Most authors would rather write the whole book than have to do that. But there's just such a power to it. And it keeps you focused.
And similarly, I liked, don't hide the glitter, don't hide the good stuff. So, that's about and again, I think, some of us who maybe do have more familiar with report writing, we might, and here is the recommendations right at the end. Whereas, let's elevate that to near the start of the story. So, so that the reader can, again, get the point more quickly without, having to read the whole through to the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. My friends will, if they send me a long email, they'll literally head it with, keep reading, don't stop, read to the bottom.
Amazing. And I think it was really powerful how you showed us how it could be applied to, like, Joe and his health centre. That so we might think that all these techniques are great for, as you say, for a novelist, but how surely it's a bit too much. But as you say, if you apply those techniques, they can really apply to anything. And I think community organisations have got such great stories and characters that let's make the most of them.
Well, absolutely. And the reason I wanted to do that when I developed this for Volunteer Wellington last year was because we always talk about storytelling. I'm like, well, let's use story. If we're talking about storytelling, let's use storytelling techniques. I think there's a question. Are you happy for me to read the question out from the chat and answer that?
Yes, that'd be great. Mm-hmm.
Okay. This is from Jess. Any tips for quickly picking the gems out of an interview? Sometimes the subject give me too much to work with, but I can't include it all. Yes. How would how would I make the decision of what to keep and what to cut? Oh, I love this question. Thank you. I would, for a start, keep your questions focused on that goal, motivation, conflict. If it's going sideways, just ask them, what did you have to do to overcome this? Or did you come up against any difficulties, and why were you so motivated to do this? And people often people never give you the true answer first. You sometimes have to dig. So, I just wanted to help and make a difference. But just, you keep pushing whatever your mahi is. Do you have anyone who's, been affected by whatever it is you're doing there? And just push them don't push them so hard they're giving you stuff they're not comfortable with. And always check that they're comfortable for this to be part of the story. But I would really encourage that. And really hone in on the conflict, and then look at the story structure to see where things are fitting. And honestly, if you can keep your stats out of it and let the story speak for itself. But I would channel everything around goal, motivation, and conflict. And think of that fun and games beat for story. What's the funniest thing that's ever happened to you while you've been volunteering for us? And you're going to get a lovely story. And what would you like to tell another like a potential volunteer for coming here? And you can lead towards those quotes, and then you can, once you start writing in this style where it's focused around character, the questions will start becoming easier. You'll almost see where you want the answers to be. And so if you've not got them, you just can dig a bit deeper. Hopefully that's useful. Do you use font or color to catch attention? What words do you avoid? No, I personally don't. Well, clearly for writing books, that's no, I've never in a book. So I probably can't speak as much to that. What words I think, honestly, I think not avoid. For me, I wouldn't particularly avoid words. I look for repetition of words. Like, usually they're the things my fun thing is I do text to speech for editing, and I can pick up a lot more word repeats. There's nothing worse than looking at something you've written and it's being published and the same word is repeated 7 times on the page. So that's where I'd start, is more just keeping the text clean and free of repeat words or clunky words. Would you mind sharing the PowerPoint after the meeting? Yes, that's fine. I will be sharing that. Any other questions?
I think just further to that point, Amanda, we had a discussion at another hui the other day about, again, it comes perhaps down to your pitfalls sort of point about maybe trying to avoid the phrase, using volunteers or our volunteers. They're not your volunteers, and they're not, shouldn't be using them as free labor. Those kinds of subtleties about language.
That's great, and I think too, and that's especially if we're telling volunteer stories, if you keep the focus on the volunteer, we tell the story through their eyes, you won't even get that language doesn't need to come out as much, because you're just discreetly taking your organization out of it to shine a light on them, but within the framework of your organization.
Fantastic. Any more thoughts or questions?
Has anyone had any light bulb moments that you're going to take back with you for your next volunteer interview? Oh, absolutely, Joanne. Yay.
Yes, absolutely.
Yay. Cool. Definitely focusing on not burying the lead. I love it. Yes. And that by having that blurb as well, it will help keep things tight. Oh yes, a reminder of show don't tell. Show don't tell. The more you practice, the easier it becomes. It. I remember when I first did a workshop on it, I thought, yeah, this is so easy, and I got home and was like, what? Oh, I love this. Look, so Sasha said she's going to look into conflict and using it. A lot of new writers, don't, even in fiction books, don't like being mean to characters. Oh, I love them so much. I don't want to hurt them. But the conflict is the story. And I do think that's the one thing that often gets put out. And your volunteers have their own challenges too. And as long as it's appropriate to share those things. Here's Donna. Especially remembering to include conflict aspect, often shy away from the negative, especially in social media. Yeah. And actually, sorry, I forgot to say, we tend to think of conflict as a bad thing. Conflict is not shouting. It's not a negative thing. It literally is just the thing stopping a character getting from here to here. So if you reframe that conflict, it's, it doesn't need to have a negative aspect. It's, what challenges did you have to overcome? They make the most beautiful volunteer stories. I wrote one on when I was a volunteer manager, and the shift started at 6:30 in the morning, and I think I started the story like every morning at 6:30 on the dot. There he is, rain, hail, or shine, and it's sort of, no one wants to get out of bed that early. So I sort of almost led with the conflict, but it was a really beautiful story. Everyone's gone shy.
Well, I think that's really great, and we can all go away and now practice our writing in the remaining time. So again, I'd just really like to thank you, Amanda, for sharing your expertise today and making it a fun and entertaining session. It's been awesome.
You're welcome. It should be fun. We need to writing is not scary. And when we're telling stories about beautiful human beings, it's lovely. So I really do hope that it is a help.
Thank you. I'll close our session today with another karakia. Whitikatia ki runga, whitikatia ki raro, ki tau ki aiotanga, ki tau ki maramatanga, I roto te pono me te tika, ki tau, kua tau. Tuturu, whakamua, kia tina. Haume, hui e, tae ki e. Thank you, everyone.